Ever wonder what makes sourdough sour? It's easy to adjust the level of sourness to make it just right. Sourdough is made with a naturally fermented sourdough starter. Microorganisms are naturally present on the grains that make our flour, and they're a mix of wild yeast and lactic acid bacteria, or LAB. They feed on the starches and sugars and produce carbon dioxide and various organic acids. The wild yeast feeds off the carbohydrates, produces carbon dioxide and alcohol, and allows our bread to rise and gives it the texture. The lactic acid bacteria consumes the sugars, producing lactic acid as a byproduct. This gives us the tangy and sour flavor to our bread. Acetic acid bacteria consumes the sugars, producing acetic acid as a byproduct, which gives another dimension to the sourness. There are a bunch of factors that influence the level of sourness of our sourdough. The first one is the fermentation time. The longer the fermentation time, the more time the microorganisms have to produce acids, and this intensifies the sour flavor. The second is the fermentation temperature. The warmer the temperature, the increased microbial activity that will happen, and the faster the fermentation, so you'll get more sourness. Another factor is the type of flour. Whole grains have higher bran and germ content, making it a more complex and tangy flavor. The sourdough starter maintenance. A well-maintained starter gives a good balance of yeast and lactic acid bacteria and gives a consistent and desirable sourdough flavor. Now, how do we adjust the sourdough sourness? First, you can adjust the fermentation time. If you want it to be less sour, you shorten your bulk fermentation time, have less time for the acids to develop, and a less sour flavor. Second, you can adjust the fermentation temperature. If you want it less sour, use a cooler temperature, which will slow down the fermentation, producing less acid and a milder flavor. Warmer temperatures, of course, produce faster fermentation, more acid, and more pronounced sourness. Using different flours also impacts the sourness of your sourdough. A higher proportion of whole grains like sorghum or buckwheat will result in a more robust flavor. The composition of your sourdough starter directly impacts the sourness of your sourdough. If less sourness is desired, try feeding your starter a lower ratio of starter to feed. For example, 1 part starter, 5 parts flour, and 5 parts water. Feeding your starter more often allows less buildup of acid, and it'll be less sour. The higher the hydration of your starter, in other words, the more liquid, the milder it will be. The same can be said for the hydration level of our dough. If you want the dough to be less sour, try using more water and a higher hydration dough. That will give you a milder flavor, versus a lower hydration dough with less water can intensify the sourness. Sourdough recipes call for an active starter component, also called a pre-ferment or leaven. If you want your sourdough to be less sour, shorten the fermentation time for your leaven, or use a higher hydration level for your leaven. Now that you know how to make your sourdough the perfect sourness level, let's go make some sourdough. Check out all of our amazing sourdough recipes at TUMERICMeCrazy.com. And join me next week to make my incredibly delicious superfood blender bread made with a sourdough starter. It's so delicious and easy, I promise it'll blow your mind. Thanks so much for watching, and please like, comment, and subscribe, and hit that little bell to be notified when my next video comes out.